that's too deep. That's,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that, so that's kind of like one of the challenges, especially when it comes to the type of work that we do, I think, is because it's like you want people, you would think that when they come to you and they're like, okay, I need some help in this area, that they're willing to do it,
Right.
because they're troubled. But what I'm finding is over the last, I don't know, I'm going to say about 6 months, there has been this interesting cycle that I've noticed, and it's this same pattern. Like they start getting so much to do so that they don't have to do anything. And their excuse is, well, because I'm busy doing this, when they're not. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, uh, literally, I think it's time that people are starting to have to choose. And this is a very hard thing for them to accept. Like you literally have to choose between good and evil.
Right.
And it's I
And
think
honoring your
because,
word and not honoring your word. And
right. Yeah. And so I think that as much as that everybody wants and says that that's what they want to know exactly what, do they? Do they not?
right.
You
I mean, there's
know?
some people who just want to do the spiritual bypass.
Right.
Just, wipe it away so I don't have to deal with it. But that doesn't work either. And I know, like, there's some programs out there for shadow work there where they actually have you reflect on everything. And I have a workbook that kind of does that. But usually when I'm handing it to the person, that's because they don't want to pay for it to do it my way.
Right.
It's like, fine, if you want to reflect and think about it, here's my workbook.
Yeah.
But if you want to be able to just like emotionally let it go so it becomes easier to deal with,
Right.
then I have a different way.
Well, and I guess, even this is the one thing that has always just kind of thrown me is like, um, people that do this work, they know what a difference it makes. It
Right.
doesn't matter if they're tapping, reading, emotion coding, Akashic recording, any of this stuff. Like they understand that it feels different in their body.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I mean, but I am the same way. Sometimes I get really stubborn. Like there was a while where I'm like, I know I should be emotion coding, but I'm just like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
screw that. I don't want
Well,
to, you
know,
know.
I've also been like told by my guides and that stuff, yeah, it's great that we know how to do it on our own. But yet there's times where we get so emotionally connected to it that seeing through it right when it starts is not going to work. So therefore, you'd actually have to work through it, even though you know what's going on, and follow through that crap to go, okay, now I can fix it for the next time. Or
Mm-hmm.
I just call a friend going, hey, this is what's going on. Can you look at it so we can get it to stop?
Yeah.
And, it's like, and it helps that cycle too of knowing where your limit is, who's your support team to be able to move through this.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's just so fascinating to me, because like I said, I try to look at myself in a lot of these situations. Like when I see these patterns and things, then it's kind of like, okay, now that I'm noticing, is that something that I'm doing or that I have done, or is it something that I'm currently in? you know, why it's like, bam, in my face, and so it's been very fascinating to me to discover and to learn and to understand. But just like everybody else, I get stubborn too, and there's sometimes that it's like, oh, screw that, I don't feel like it. Right now I just feel like I want to be honoring, and
Right.
so because I mean, there's sometimes when um I know that one of the things that I have to work on is my self-righteousness. Like I know that is something that I have watched develop over the years from my parents and others, from other siblings. And I know it's a trait that I have because I see myself doing it only after the fact, not while in the middle of it. So it's like, how interesting is that? But, and that's just recently come, and I would like to think that I've always been kind and gentle and nurturing to people and everything like that. But there's sometimes when I realize now, even in reflecting, where I'm like, wow, that was pretty self-righteous of me.
Yep. I have to keep those moments in check too, especially being a Leo. Those self-righteous moments just come naturally.
Well, it's just there's sometimes, and I know everybody feels this way. It's like there's sometimes when you're just like, gosh, if you would just do it the way I said, it would be so much easier. So much easier. But no, and then there's times when other people bring stuff to my attention that I'm like, seriously, and they're like, yeah, if you would just do it the way I said, it would be a lot easier. But no, that's not me. I tie my shoes together, and then I put on 3 different pairs of shoes on top of that. And then whatever I can do to, sabotage and make it very challenging and difficult. I always laugh because like Tony Robbins, he was talking about that. He says, if you want to complicate something, give it to a human.
And that is so true. But yet there's so many things that, because I know, like, I have not been on Earth long. I'm down here every so many 100 years and then I leave again. And it's been really interesting this trip because I'm like looking at everyone and what they tell themselves and what they believe. It's like, you do know this is not true, right? And it's hard to get them to switch their thinking from this last like 2,000 years of stuff. Because like even the Bible says everything's inside of us. So why do we keep on going outside for everything?
Right.
It's like, okay, you guys, if we would just actually incorporate the Bible and realize what those words actually mean and not take it out of text all the time,
Right.
we would have a better understanding of how our body works with our spiritual structure and how they need to work together for us to ascend. Because if they're not working together, we don't ascend. Right.
We stay in the muck and mire. Well, okay, so well, let's talk about that just a little bit. How do we get an eternal perspective while being earthbound? I think that is the biggest challenge, yes? So
it is.
Yeah, explain.
And this has been the interesting one because everyone says like, oh my God, you need to ground, you need to ground, you need to ground. And I'm like, but our bodies already come from the earth. They're already part of the earth. We don't need to ground to the earth. We need to ground to our bodies. And in order to do that, we need to connect with the second chakra, not the first.
Interesting.
Because our second chakra is our connection to source. It's our connection to life. It's our connection to creativity. So all these people who can imagine and think and create are really connected to their bodies and their second chakra. And so it's really interesting. It's like, no, we need to like don't drop the first chakra, but let's not have that as our main one.
Right. Well, and so in gaining back this connection, because this is interesting that you would bring that up, because I have heard a lot of people say over the last, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's caught my attention, but they have been like, I just don't feel connected to my body. I have all this stuff going on. I just don't feel like I'm connected to my body. I find that very interesting. So how do we connect with anything else if we're not connected with the one thing that we're with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
That's just it. We don't. Because we have to connect to our bodies to be able to accept our life, to be able to move through it. You know, and there's so many other factors out here too that like stops our soul and our mind from connecting, that we need to work on. Really just, you know, if we connect it to our bodies, that would make it so much easier.
Yeah. Well, so in, I don't know. Okay, I'm kind of guessing that like nobody else is going to get on with us today.
Yeah, I'm kind of guessing that. So we can just continue. I mean, it's recording. We can continue on the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. This is my hour. I have been working very diligently at making sure I schedule this hour for this in particular, because sometimes this conversation, sometimes it is just something that needs to happen. Because sometimes in just conversing, then it's like the self-discovery is always wonderful, you know.
Exactly.
And so it's like when we're starting to connect, well, and since today was supposed to be highlighting you and your talents, let's use a few of them. How
Right.
do you go into the Akashic records and have somebody start getting in tune with their body through the second chakra?
So what I do is that I always go to my second chakra first, connect. I bring in my heart chakra into it. So that way my connection is always through love.
Okay.
And then your eighth chakra is your Akashic records. And that's about 18 inches above your head.
Okay.
So it's the last one that we can physically touch. And so usually, like for me, I can connect this and just kind of look and go, okay, this is your Akashic records, and we're going to go into it and check and see. But if I'm attuning somebody else to their Akashic records, I would have them stretch open their crown, connect their eighth and their crown together. So that way they're connected to their Akashic records and their knowledge, and then bring that down around them.
Interesting.
And that way they're kind of immersed in their Akashic records and their seventh chakra at this moment. And then we would go through a little attunement ceremony and then have them open up and walk and spend some time in their Akashic records to be able to explore, see what's there, because there's so many different things in your Akashic records. You know, it's like going, like even just the other week or the other day, I was driving around, you know, roundabout, what a traffic circle, whatever you want to call them. And I saw this car like cut in front of me. And the next thing you know, it was gone. And I was like, oh, we're doing a timeline loop. Okay, cool. And so I was like going, hey guys, can we go in the Akashic records and start merging timelines again so this doesn't happen? And so they did that. And I was like, okay, cool. But it's also like, you know, when you're in there, you have your 1D timeline in there, you have your 2D timeline in there, the 3D that most of us are leaving. Some of us are getting stuck there. Then you have the 4D, which is just basically your cleanup bridge. And then you have the 5D, which is, let's see here. You know those people who are always happy and grateful for everything?
Yes.
Those people are 5D.
Interesting.
But a lot of us too, once we get to that point, we're also, if we can stay in our bodies, we're going to move into that 6D really fast. Because 6D is 5D, but being into our bodies.
Interesting.
So it's that being extremely grateful for everything that comes our way, and then being into the bodies at the same time.
So from an Akashic standpoint, how do we get to the point where we can be grateful for the past experiences without like healing them or anything like that? How do we get to a point, you know, today where we could be thankful for all of the past experiences that we have experienced, regardless of what they have been? How do we get to a point?
By just saying, I know there's a positive experience from each, there's a positive lesson from each one of these. And as soon as we start to even switch our mind concept from constantly looking for the negative to looking for the positive, that will switch us from the victim mode out of the victim mode. And as soon as we leave that victim mode, we can find that happiness in everything we do. We can find that positive in everything we do. But we have to leave that victim mode. And the one thing that what I liked about this, because of my childhood, and yeah, I was stuck in victim mode for a really long time, is that when I do this and the way I do it, you go into the Akashic records and you start releasing those negative emotions around all these events without having to relive it.
Interesting.
And that was my biggest criteria. Like, I didn't want to have to relive it. I didn't want to have to talk about it, because I just intuitively knew that the more you talked about it, the more your soul really thinks is who you are.
Right.
And again, the more we talk about something negative, the more we're truly not okay with it.
Right.
Because if you notice, people who have healed, they don't talk about their stuff unless somebody asks them,
Yeah.
because they know it's not them. They know it's not who they are. And they know that they're okay with what happened now.
Do you think that, okay, so like Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton, they talk about how our mind really is like living in memory. Like, it does not know that it's a new event. It starts looking for ties to past events that start warning us of, hey, this happened before, you better be careful, kind of a thing. So what are your thoughts on that link of, sometimes we, in learning how to focus in the moment, how can we get our brain really to focus like we're here now? They always, before I let you answer, Eckhart Tolle talks about how, this meditation and bringing yourself into the moment, he says the best way to do it is to wash your hands. He says, and notice the water on your hands, and notice the soap, the way it feels. That brings your mind into the moment. So how do we keep our mind in this moment instead of over there,
So the thing that I have noticed is it's really not the mind. We think it is, because it likes to wander, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when our heart has the right emotions in it, we're going to automatically stay in the moment. And your soul your soul's DNA is every emotion it's ever been through. Your mind is going to pass on with this lifetime. You're not going to have this mind again next lifetime. But you will have every emotion. You'll have how you felt about your house, how you felt about your hubby, how you felt about the food that you intake, how you felt. Everything is about feelings with your soul. That is the only thing it has to carry on. And it's interesting that, and I've noticed that people who do like the law of attraction and they follow the bind concept,
Mm-hmm.
they are literally having to work hard every single day mentally at getting everything aligned so they can have what they want.
Well, changing your mind is one of the most difficult things in the world.
But what if it's not changing your mind? What if it's changing your heart?
Now that I would agree with. I am totally behind changing the way the heart feels about things.
Yes, because the heart is always on autopilot. Your mind is not. And I found this out by my life. I would sit there and go day after day with law of attraction, whatever. And then as soon as I get something, like I would still work on it for a few more weeks, and then it would just leave. And I'd be like, okay, why did I have it here, but now it's gone? And I was like, where's the pattern? And I was like, oh, my heart emotion. It didn't think it was worthy. It wasn't happy. It wasn't content. It wasn't grateful.
Right.
I wasn't in joy. And I always thought I was going to lose it mentally, even though I had to work at it.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, this is where, okay, because I think it's Greg Braden. He talks a lot about getting the heart together. Excuse me, but he talks about how living in the heart center, and there's this, what is it called? It's called heart math.
Yeah.
Maybe I said that wrong, but I think those two words combined in one order or the other. But they teach you to, like, it really is all about the heart. It really is like, this is where the divine comes from. This is where we find it all within, is, how is living in that heart. And so when we have problems with our heart chakra or our heart, what are some of the things that you would advise people to do to clear out that heart chakra, or some questions that they could ask that would be like, okay, yeah, I need to do some cleanup, something that they would be able to recognize?
So when they have that emotion that's going through, I mean, this is a good way to do some of the reflection on it. If you're not working with anyone, is, okay, like, say you're frustrated, and that's the emotion that's coming through the heart right now. Okay, where else in my childhood have I been frustrated, and why? And then go back and start writing about and taking care of those, and looking at what could be a positive, what is one thing that could be positive from that situation, and then move forward.
Interesting. Do you find that it's more effective if, when people book an appointment with you, to bring a notebook so that they can write these experiences as you're going through the session?
Yes. I even give, like, if you're doing one of my programs, I send you a journal. I send you some colored, like, a little goodie basket of things you're going to need for my program.
How interesting. So, well, okay. So tell me, because of course this particular episode of this show is dedicated to you and your showing your abilities and talents. So let's talk about what they are. So you're an Akashic record healer. And you work with people through their Akashic records to heal the events.
Yes.
So what are some of the programs that you offer? Let's talk about the programs that you offer.
So my most popular one is the Soul Restructuring program. And that one there, we go through and we end parallel universes. I know there's some out there that say not to end them, but I have also come to realize that when we have, because they sit there say that we can live in different dimensions at different times. And out in the galaxy, they're right, we can. But I've realized here on Earth, we can't. If we have parallel universes, it's because we've had trauma in a past life here, and some of those soul fragments got trapped there.
Interesting.
And so it's time to bring them all back in. And when you bring them all back in, you end up closing off and, ending those parallel universes, which is a good thing.
Well, I definitely believe that if you're going to live your life purpose, you have to be completely present. That means nothing wandering off, or it's like it's time to bring all your shards home, literally,
right.
Get them back together, because I think it's sometimes I think what the extra stuff does is really distract us from what our purpose here on Earth is. And how can, with doing this, like, how does one, after they bring everything back, how does one, I mean, I know that we did an episode on this about finding our purpose, because each one of us is different. We each have a different purpose, but humanity as a whole has the same purpose, which is to be a part of this. That means everybody's interactive. That means everybody's a part of this. And so how do you teach people to be a part of, when they feel like they're just completely, like, detached and not a part of this world? Because to help each other, we have to be with each other. We have to, that's part of bringing this humanity thing around. That's why we're all here, but how do we get that to work with our Akashic records?
So that's a good question. So one of the things that will help with that is that once we start to bring back those soul fragments, we start to realize like, oh, we start to feel a lot whole, a lot more whole, a lot. And we stop giving away our soul fragments as easy. Because I've noticed that a lot of people who are missing a lot of soul fragments give them away. Like when they feel sorry for somebody, they're actually giving a piece of soul fragment away. You know, we have this word of empathy that's going around instead of compassion. And when we have empathy for somebody, we're feeling sorry for them instead of having compassion and understanding for them to be where they're at. And maybe just to sit with them while they go through it instead of needing to change them while they go through it. So it's been really interesting because, you know, we have all these like, you know, homeless people that panhandle for money on the side of the road. And there's people who like going, oh my God, I feel so sorry for them. But it's like, you know, what if they like it? Have you ever just talked to them?
Right.
You know, we had a coffee shop in Loveland, Colorado there that displaced some of the homeless.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. And some of them were even like, we'd be sitting there talking about it. He goes, no, he goes, I love this life. He goes, I have no responsibilities.
Right.
I don't have rent. I have money for food when I need it. Or I have ways to get food when I need it. You know, I always have a place to sleep. And he goes, and I get to travel.
Right.
He goes, this is true freedom. And I'm like going, there's an interesting way of looking at it. You know, it's like, okay, instead of just sitting there saying, you know, oh, we have to change you.
Right.
You know, have compassion and allow them to be. And if they want something different, they will have it.
Well, it's interesting because even with that, what you said right there, we were talking about Bible theories a little bit earlier. So in the Bible, they talk about the city of Enoch, right? And how it was so righteous that my husband is calling and he's like, woman, answer your phone. But when there was no want, there was no need in the city of Enoch. Like everybody helped everybody. There was no judgments, there was no expectations, there was just complete righteousness, like, and complete compassion for each other. They didn't, you know, if somebody was sick, everybody helped out. And, you know, one of the things that that I have seen in this pandemic is the people, they've been resilient as far as like showing their ability to connect. Like they have been like, that has been totally mind-blowing, even watching on Facebook and things like that, their ability to connect with other people during this pandemic. But the ability to be able to kind of get into that mindset of we're all helping each other, like that seems to be one of our biggest humanity issues, is because it's like, you know, now it's like, I mean, everybody makes jokes and everybody is serious at the same time. Like, you know, now when you see somebody cough or sneeze, you're like, ugh, you know, right? Or don't do it, you know. maybe if I just hold still, the germ will not see me. You know.
Right.
So how do we get to this point of like absolute true love for humanity, for each other?
So what I was just getting from my guides at this time when you're talking about that is that we need to all start looking through everyone else's window as if it's our window.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't have something, instead of like going and, you know, start helping them through it if they really want the help.
Right.
You know, instead of being jealous and having that division of jealousy and envy throughout this world, because there's a lot of that going on too. You know, there's so many people who are envious of other people who have, and they, you know, like I know a lot of people who have money, And a lot of them are very grateful and helpful and within their community. But yet, these are also the people that you would not think would have money.
Right. Right.
And so because they don't flaunt it.
Right.
So maybe that's just it too. Maybe we need to stop getting away from flaunting and allowing everyone to be, and then helping them out when we can.
Right. Well, and I find it interesting because like there's all sorts of things that we do, I mean, let's take for instance, the show. Have you ever seen the TV series Survivor?
A couple times, yes.
Okay, so they take a group of people and they put them out somewhere, and then it's like every man for himself until they get back.
Right.
And like I kind of like that show. I haven't seen whatever episodes they have. I watched like the first 7 seasons of it. Okay, so 7 years of my life I gave to Survivor. But I always found it very fascinating because you start connecting with those people. You get your favorites and all this kind of stuff, and you start cheering for them and all this kind of stuff. But one thing that I noticed, and maybe other people have done this, I don't know, I can only speak from what I've done, but there's times when I'm watching them and I'm like, seriously, do they not understand what they're doing? Like they're never going to be able to get what they need out of whatever. And then there's other times that I'm like, even if I was chosen to be on that show, I would never go. Just because like I'm not going to be stuck out in the wilderness with no toilet. Or anything like that. And so there's this boundary. Like I admire people who have no boundaries like that, where they can go and do that stuff and just, whatever needs to be done for whatever prize they're working for. But me, it's like, why I can sit there and be like, oh, why are they doing that? And do they not see the manipulation, when
Right.
it's very obviously pointed out, that kind of stuff. So when we're getting into that area of, to bring this back around, when we're getting into that area of like, how do we live with people and not get judgmental, and I know that's maybe not the most correct word to use, judgmental, but when we're looking at people and we see them going through stuff, how do we participate? How do we help, without being like judgmental? Because there's a fine line. Would you agree that there's like an honest want to help versus an honest like, oh, I should just go over there and do that. What I mean? So how do we start distinguishing, with the help of the Akashic records, how can we start distinguishing this very fine line of whether we're being really honestly helpful, or if it's our tendency to judge and want to make things right and fix things for people?
Well, okay, so with the Akashic records, I don't know if that's really going to be, we can do some stuff in there to help like with those emotions, but I also know that we mirror everyone. So if we're seeing that judgmental thing on TV through that thing and we're needing to watch it, then we need to figure out why we're being tuned into this at this frequency. Because we already know that judgment is a low frequency.
Right.
And if we're being tuned into it, then we're like going, okay, I'm seeing this. Where in my life am I being judgmental? Where am I being manipulative? That I'm recognizing it in other people. And this is where we can go in like through the Akashic records and start feeding that part of you love. So that way, because as soon as you start feeding it love, it starts to go away. Because we only see in other people what we like, love, or hate about ourselves the most.
I agree with that.
So it's always those intense feelings, those intense things that we see. So if we look at somebody and we're not seeing anything malicious, negative from them, it's because we're loving every part of us, even the parts of us that do that.
Right.
So we're not seeing it in other people. But if we're looking at people and we're seeing all this stuff, then we know that we are actually being that way because the universe will always mirror us, and we can go into the Akashic records and start taking care of some of that stuff and feeding that darker side of us, that love, taking away those negative emotions that are feeding it also.
Mm-hmm.
So that way they can go away.
Well, and I find it fascinating because it's like when we start taking away that stuff, like you know that you're starting to heal because even the stuff that you pay attention to changes dramatically.
It
You know,
does.
like the music that you listen to changes, the words, you know, the shows or movies or, you know, things that you would do, they change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because like, you know, you may have been like, oh my gosh, like, you know, when I guess the perfect example would be like I love reading books. As you can tell by my bookshelf behind me, right? Like I got books. Um, my taste in books has immensely changed because of my different, I guess, different steps that I have taken. So like I
Mm-hmm.
used to be like an avid Stephen King, I mean, book hound. Like I loved all his books, all that kind of stuff. The one thing that kind of got me was I think that got me kind of thinking about other stuff. And I think Stephen King is really great for this, is his book called Insomnia. And he talks about how this guy gets insomnia, and as he's waking up earlier and earlier, he notices two spirit forms that go around, and like above every human, there's a little string with a balloon at the top. And he would see them go around, and he would just see them snip them balloons, and then the person would have an accident and they would die. And I like that perspective because it gives you something to think about. Like maybe there is something more. Maybe there is something that I need to be doing. Maybe I need to be paying attention to something more. Like it gets that curiosity going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, then of course my books have changed. You know, while I still enjoy Stephen King because I think he's masterful in that way, I'm now paying attention to people like, you know, well, some of the great ones that everybody's familiar with, like Louise Hay. I like some of her stuff. Wayne Dyer, I like some of his stuff. You know, Eckhart Tolle, like his books are challenging still to read, which means I'm still not quite understanding all that he teaches,
Right.
but it's starting to like get that understanding. But like, you know, Henry Wright, those kind of authors, like I've noticed a huge change in even that appetite. And that's been over the last, I don't know, 15 years. So it's not something that I don't think happens like instantly. You don't go from like hardcore Stephen King to I read nothing but Louise Hay, you know. You don't do that overnight, right?
Right.
So how
And it's
does,
funny because some people do.
yes,
And
I
the
will
ones
admit.
who do, man, their worlds go chaotic quickly,
Mhm.
and then they stop it all
Why?
because they can't handle everything coming to the surface. It's kind of like this last year or this last year and a half, 2020,
Mhm.
kind of everything stopped and everything came to the surface.
Mhm.
Well, when we stop one thing fully and we kind of go to another thing, the opposite, the pendulum swings. Just show this. The pendulum swings, and if it goes one way, we're over here. It has to go this way before it can find its middle.
Right.
But if we're taking one thing at a time, if we're somewhat balanced, we're taking one thing at a time and changing it up, we're going to keep that balance.
Yeah. So let's talk about that balance for a minute because, like, I totally agree. Like, 2020 was a year of a lot of things surfacing for a lot of people, not just the pandemic, but it gave us the chance to really, like, what is my home life like? What is my relationship life like? You know, because, like, they never had to spend time with their people that much. We're used to like get up, get ready, go to work, you spend your day with them, and then you come home and you know, spend your night with the people. But during this pandemic, a lot of people didn't go to work anymore. They worked at home. And so this new, like all this stuff started coming up, and they're like, I didn't realize this irritated me about them. You know, how does one start recovering from all of these things that they never had to deal with, really? to all of a sudden being confronted with them nonstop. So how does one start finding the balance in working with the Akashic records? What do you offer? Is there a program that you offer in starting that balance, or
So starting
what
that
alone?
balance, yeah. So that there would be my basic program. It's a 6-week program. We're just going to go in and take one concept and start to work on that in there for those 6 weeks. So they can work on just changing that one concept, whether it's finances, whether it's the way they feel it, love about themselves, whether no matter like, because even one concept has a whole bunch of other sub concepts to it
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to work on.
Well, how do you, okay, so this is like the biggest challenge, okay, because I think a lot of people feel this way. They're like, they start into something like this and they're like, okay, I feel like I've accomplished this one. Now can we move on to the next? Or they get sidetracked with, well, how do I start, they start working on, say, finances, and they get sidetracked by, well, how do I get this love and self acceptance and stuff like that? How do you work with them to keep them on track using just one thing at a time? And why is that important, one thing at a time?
So how I keep them on track is that we keep on bringing them back to that point of focus. Like, why are you here? Why are we doing this one subject? What is it you want to see? That's the main biggest thing. And then to second part of the question, like, and then to help them just really just help them focus, because if they're being scattered, then we need to go, okay, where else are you being scattered in your life?
Right.
Start teaching them again how to be in their bodies. Because again, when we were kids and our parents said, God, get out of your head.
Yes.
And they never told you where to go.
Right.
Well, you go to your second chakra.
Interesting.
That's where you go. Yeah, it is. It's very interesting that they would say, hey, get out of your head and stop thinking about it. But then, okay, where do you go to stop thinking about it? It's like they don't tell you anything like that. You go into your body, into your second chakra. And the interesting thing is that for women, our second chakra is our uterus.
Birthing ideas, creation.
Life.
Yes.
For men, they need to follow their urethra up into inside their bodies. And it's right on that little tip.
Interesting. That is very fascinating to me. So, okay. One of the things that I think is very important, especially in this particular one, is how do people get a hold of you to set up these appointments and to book sessions with you?
So people can go ahead and get a hold of me on my website with healingwithmichelleadams.com. They can find me at Facebook with Healing with Michelle Adams on Facebook. And then you can also email me at michellea728@gmail.com.
Okay. And so now how many now for the ones that follow you on your YouTube channel, because I know you have a YouTube channel, let's talk a little bit about the YouTube channel. What is your purpose with your YouTube channel, and what kind of information do you have on there for those that are just listening to this and getting ready to subscribe?
So my main purpose is to give people information to help give them knowledge, and then also to help give them ways to heal. So on my YouTube channel, I've created my meditation cards. And on the back of each one, there's affirmations.
Nice.
And so what I did was I read the affirmations into a meditation with music.
Okay.
And
Nice.
so they're all on my YouTube channel.
Very good. Now, for everybody that's paying attention and watching this, like YouTube, you can go on to Michelle's YouTube channel and subscribe for free. It costs nothing. She's got free information on there. These meditations are free to listen to anytime, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing this, when this is the key part, because this seems to be another question, like there is such a variety of stuff out there. Where do you start? And, my experience with the Akashic records has been a little bit different than Michelle, but it's all the same. Like the Akashic records help you understand you.
Mm-hmm.
What Michelle's being able to do with this is to be able to help guide and direct in the manner in which you want to proceed. It's not, and it's very fascinating when you start healing and you going through these, because when you start working on this, like how um how easy is it for people to get just overwhelmed in the first few minutes in experiencing the Akashic records?
Well, when they're working with me, I'm really the only one up in there for them. And the first couple sessions, no matter what I'm doing, I do what's called prepping the soul.
Okay.
And we work on some energy work slowly. So it's not until like week 3 or 4, depending on what program you're in, that we're starting to dive in quickly and doing a lot more. Because our soul can only handle so much at one time.
Right.
And even though like my perfect client is somebody who's been on their journey of healing, they just got to fine tune and clean things up. It's still shocking when we're going into the Akashic records and to clean up everything.
Yeah. Well, it's the residual, wouldn't you say, that is
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like, oh, okay. And everybody's going to ask, okay, what is the residual of all this kind of stuff? What would you describe the residual of all of your life? What would you describe that as when you see it in the Akashic records and you're cleaning?
So when you're in the Akashic records, your life is a bunch of books. So each year has literally a different book. And so when people like going, we're starting out the new year, this is the first day of your new your new chapter or your new book. It is so true.
Yeah.
And you get to decide how it is you want it to be. But yet the residual of this is basically, are you going to keep on getting what you've been getting? Or do you really want things to change? Do you want to move from the victim to being grateful and joyful and happy?
Nice.
Because a lot of us are not in utero in depression or victim mode.
Right.
We can be born into that, and then we need to figure out a way to get out of it. I mean, the one thing I really love, like about, like we're talking about 2020, is that has been a year of showing everyone what their shadow work needs to be. It really has.
Yes.
All these people who have been upset and angry about this and about that, it's like, I think maybe you need to figure out where that like anger or frustration and where that came from in your childhood to work on it.
Yes.
And yes, we do have this thing about like the family generational stuff, but I also believe that it's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be.
Right.
Because we're like going, oh, women were suppressed in the past, and therefore we need to go back and heal this. And it's like, well, back then we weren't alive or been back there. It was a different time period. Maybe where our ancestors were, maybe they weren't suppressed, and we're just saying they were because we think all women were suppressed.
Right.
Maybe they weren't.
Right.
Maybe it just happened in our family generation through like our grandmother and our mother. It's like going. So yeah, we really need to take a look at the time period, and also remember that everything is hereditary, but yet nothing is hereditary.
Right.
We get to decide. And there's so many other factors going on in today's world that we need to calculate in that didn't happen 200 years ago.
Right.
Like going out to a creek and getting water was not damaging to your body.
Right.
Which it is today.
Right.
Growing your own food and being self-sufficient was the ideal way of life.
Well,
You
it
didn't
was the
rely
way
on
of
anyone.
life. Right.
You didn't rely on anyone.
Yeah.
And today it's like we rely on too many other outside factors that take away our freedom and our own power.
Well, would you say, with that thought right there, do you think there was as much emotional trauma going on back then, say 200 years ago, as there is today?
So yes and no. So again, like most of the trauma, even in today's time period, are the ones in the cities, right?
Yeah.
The ones outside in the outskirts areas, like this last couple of years, have not really affected them.
Right.
And I've seen this in the area that I'm in right now in Minnesota, that they have not changed anything, even with what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And everyone just goes on with life.
Isn't that fascinating? I find that so fascinating.
So I think it's kind of even the same way back then. The ones who are around maybe the castles and the king, like they kind of lived around, like being more so like, I rely on you to feed me, had more of the trauma than the ones in the outskirts areas that grew their own foods, chopped down their own trees for their wood, built their own houses, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think it's more that the more we rely on other people, the more trauma we accumulate.
Well, and I also think, back then when I don't know how many people have actually like tried to grow their own garden and things like that, or lived on a farm and things like that. But you're busy. Like you are busy from the time the sun comes up in the morning till the time the sun goes to bed. Like you're busy, physically busy.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, you don't have time to fret or worry or rehash
Right,
all of that stuff that's been going on all day.
right,
Because, like you're out there changing water or digging holes or, driving the tractor along and things like that. You just didn't have time. You don't have time to think about, like the last fight, or why did they do that, or what was this supposed to mean, like we find ourselves doing today. We have so
right.
much time on our hands. And so how do you work with the Akashic records to kind of get people to kind of work through that, getting their mind to settle down and not focus so much on all of that, but because I think this would be included in your soul retrieval. How do you get them back to focus on just like what's right now, instead of worrying constantly about all that outside turmoil, you know?
One of the things I have them do is that I have my positive expression cards,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell them in the morning that they need to draw 3.
Okay.
Okay, from anywhere in the deck. So I'm just drawing 3 real quick, see what comes up.
Perfect.
Right. So this here says helpfulness. Okay. So then I go, during the day, you need to keep an eye on how many times you're being helpful and how many times other people are being helpful, whether it's to you or not.
Right.
Because we need to recognize it in other people and how they help other people.
Yes.
This here is tact. How many times are you being tactful with your own words or your own actions towards other people? And how many times are you seeing it in other people? Because this here gives them things to focus on during the day to go, oh, wait a minute, I need to be watching for this, this, and this. And because these are all positive behaviors, it also reinforces that positive that we want to see in the world. And then the last one is cheerfulness. How many times during the day were we just grateful and happy just because we wanted to be?
Right.
How many times did we just see somebody else smile or their eyes light up for some reason?
Right.
I'm like going, it's one of those things that I always say both ways, because a lot of people, they can easier see it in other people if it's being done to them,
Mm-hmm.
but they usually cannot see it if it's being done to somebody else. And they
Interesting.
really have a hard time recognizing it if they're doing it to somebody else.
Very fascinating.
So again, no matter what, I mean, whether we're bringing service to self or service to others, if we're not connected, if we're not healthy, it's not, the service isn't working anyways.
Very good. Well, okay, so that kind of brings us to our end, and it's neat that you were able to draw the 3 cards for us. That was kind of neat because it kind of gives us like something to do from today until next Friday. Like,
Yeah.
focus on those 3 cards all week long. How can you see it in yourself? How can you see it in others? And how can you see others seeing it in others? Because that's how a chain gets started and it really just kind of builds, right? So
Right.
I find it very fascinating that we were able to, that one, I'm going to compliment you a lot right now, because one, I think it's amazing that you were able to come up with your own cards to be able to use. Like, that is spectacular. Like, I like affirmation cards. I like the oracle cards. I like that kind of stuff because it is something tangible that you can hang on to.
Mhm.
And, you feel like you're a little more in it.
Yeah.
And so, two, like, I appreciate you taking the time to explore and talk about some of the aspects of what you do. Now, I know it isn't all of them, and I know that you are so talented in being able to help people work through their Akashic records and with them. And I guess I haven't. I guess I'm bad and naughty because I haven't actually looked through all of your programs yet, but I will now. So I can find all your programs on your website. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to tell everybody again, like, if you want to start working this way, like being able to visit with just Michelle one-on-one today was absolutely fabulous because it gave her a chance to really speak and tell us what she does and how she does it. Being able to pick somebody to go through and start healing, it's an amazing thing, and it's something that needs to be paid attention to because you want to pick out the right people for what you're working on. And so I think Michelle has given like plenty of points of how she can help, and I think she'd be a good one. So I would encourage people to book a session with Michelle so that she can explain further and test out the waters, and then you guys can go further, because honestly, Michelle, like, I enjoy watching you work. I've seen you at events before. I like watching you work with people. People seem to be connected with you really well. So that's a good thing. So I
Mhm.
want to just tell you that, thank you for being able to do these Zoom calls so that we can get this information out to people. And thanks for your participation all the time in doing this. Like, it is a lot of work to put these things together, and it's time consuming. So I appreciate all the effort that you go through in putting these things together. So with that, again, Michelle, tell everybody again how they can get a hold of you.
So you can get a hold of me at my website with healingwithmichelleadams.com. I'm on Facebook with Healing at Michelle Adams, or you can go ahead and email me at michellea728@gmail.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, until next time where we showcase somebody else, and you'll have to tune in to find out who that's going to be. We look forward to it. So Michelle, thank you from the bottom of my heart, throughout
Thank
my
you.
heart, being here today and sharing your talents and time. And thanks for just visiting with me. And we'll see everybody next time.